Welcome to another edition of the Resiliency Project. Here we bring you stories of resilience and reinvention. We started this series to help people struggling, especially during COVID-19 times. My partner is PJ Kwong. PJ is a co-host and she helps me with this project. She helps produce, she takes your questions and comments. We try to make this as interactive as possible. PJ, welcome once again.
Teddy, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, especially today.
Well, especially today, because you've been suggesting almost for 4 months now since we started the Resiliency Project that I interview our guest today, Mike Trauner. From the very beginning, you told me that he would make a perfect guest for the Resiliency Project. Tell us why, PJ.
Well, we get a twofer today because we get Mike Trauner and we get his wife Leah Cuffe. They come as a package deal as far as I'm concerned. So when I was working at the Toronto Invictus Games 2017, I got a chance to meet these two, and you know what? They touched my heart. We became friends, and Mike's story of injury and recovery is as remarkable as Leah's support of him during all of this. So I felt it was a really important and timely story to get out there for people to really understand about life throws you a curveball. You can definitely work with it. And these two are the best example. And they're nice people.
We're going to hear about Mike and Leah's story. And Mike, as you say, it's interesting because he has a nickname. He's sometimes called Megatron. And as you say, his wife, Leah Cuffe, has been with him every step of this journey together as Mike fought his way from a hospital bed into elite sport and now representing Canada as a para-athlete in canoeing. Mike and Leah, welcome to the Resiliency Project.
Hi, thank you.
Teddy, hi, PJ. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
We are so excited to have you guys with us today. As I said, right from the beginning, when we started this project, PJ was saying to me, you have to hear their story. So today we get that opportunity. But Mike, let me start by asking you about this Megatron nickname, of course, referring to the Transformer movie. And tell us how you got that nickname.
It's actually really simple when you think about it. My last name's Trauner. I'm a big guy. Well, before I was injured, I was 6'4". So after the guys see me with, these high-tech prosthetics that I have, they just started calling me Megatron because it just kind of went together. So, and it just stuck ever since then.
I also want you to tell them the story about the little kid, though. That was one of the most charming stories, a little kid seeing you and talking about Megatron and that whole Transformer thing.
Oh, and Halloween. I don't remember which year it was. I think it was about 4 years ago. We had this little trick-or-treater come by, and he looked at my prosthetics and he says to his mom, he's like, Mom, there's a real Transformer. And his mother said, no, dear, it's just Halloween and he's dressed up. And I kind of sat there scratching my head saying, no, I'm actually not dressed up. I'm just kind of dressed. I really am part Transformer.
Oh, it's so cute.
Wow, amazing. PJ, do you want to ask Mike a little bit about his story and how it all began, where he had to deal with some of the resiliency that he's become so famous for?
So, back in 2008, you were in Afghanistan, and you talked about the fact that you weren't blown up just once, you were blown up twice. So I want to talk about that very first incident, though, because it was that incident for which you were awarded the Military Medal of Valor by Governor General Michael Jean. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Of course. So we were just doing a patrol that day. And then we got called over to do force protection for the engineers. They were our engineers, and it was their task to take down these buildings because every single time we would go through there, friendly forces were always coming under contact. So it was our job actually to take down these buildings and provide security force for our engineers while they did that. So while they were doing that, I heard over the radio that we were getting surrounded by enemy forces. So my platoon commander came running up to the right side of the vehicle and he said, Mike, I know that you heard it, but just keep your eyes peeled because they're right out in front, maybe about 100 meters out in front of us. And I said, okay, sir, how many do you think there are? And he said, it's supposed to be platoon size, but we don't know. Maybe between 20 people and 40 people. So it was a good sized force. And as soon as he walked away, I remember coming back onto the radio saying, I could see them. I could see them. Do I have permission to engage? And he says, no, we can't engage until they fire on us. And right when he said that, they fired an RPG rocket at me and hit the front of the vehicle. I told my gunner to engage with the 25 millimeter chain gun, but because the electronics had failed because of the RPG strike, everything was flickering inside my vehicle and the cannon actually wouldn't work. So I actually had to stand up on top of the vehicle. I thought that my driver had actually been killed at that time because there was a lot of smoke, which was probably just dust inside the vehicle, but I thought it was smoke at first. So when I climbed up on top of the vehicle, they fired another rocket at me. I heard right past my face. It missed. So I think it came up really, really low and skimmed over the top of my turret, and it blew up off the back of my deck, the rear deck of the vehicle. So I engaged them. I opened up with a C6 machine gun and just started laying down fire on all the people that were shooting at us. But it was a battlefield. They were everywhere. I could see their heads popping up and down over this berm and this mud hut wall about 100 meters in front of us. And I just shot at everybody that I possibly could. At that point, I was really scared about the predicament that we were in because we were surrounded. And I was the only vehicle facing south at that point where all the enemy forces were. My gunner could not get the 25 mil going again, so he switched over to coax machine gun and helped me start to lay down fire against the enemy forces. I still couldn't get through to my driver. The radio had completely failed, so I had my gunner stop, and he was screaming. He was screaming, trying to get a hold of my driver to make sure that he was still alive. And he told me, he's like, I can hear him yelling, and he said he's fine. So I said, okay, and I kept shooting. I had 440 rounds, and out of the left-hand side of my vehicle, there was a guy that came running up to me about 50 meters away. So, and I didn't even notice him, and he pointed a rocket at me, and he fired, but it came up. I know he was directly aiming for me, but it hit our winch. So thank God that winch was there. The winch blew up. We lost the winch, unfortunately. My vehicle took a real kicking that day. So I had to turn my gun and fend him off as well. I shot so many rounds of ammunition, I actually ran out of ammunition. I was ready to reach into the back, and I had all kinds of weapons back there. But at that point, we had gunships come in. They fired 16 Hellfire missiles, 8 each. And then we called in an artillery strike just to make sure. So it was a really chaotic day. After it was all said and done, I think it was a couple of months later, I'd heard back that I was going to be getting the Military Medal of Valor because of my actions that day. And when I think about it, it's pretty crazy to take 3 rockets in a row like that, survive, walk away from it, and then on December 5th, 2008, also take another explosion and still come away from it.
Mike, I want to pick up on that if I could. You know, from what you're describing there, it sounds like you cheated death once, and then a few months later, like you're talking about on December 5th, you have everything go wrong again. I want to ask you what you remember of that, because PJ tells me there's quite an interesting story about you getting hit again and overhearing your platoon talking about 2 serious casualties, not realizing that one of the people they were talking about was you.
Absolutely. So I think I got hit approximately just before 7 in the morning, local time in Afghanistan. I think it was about 6:45 a.m. That morning was very, very chilling, to say the least, because we went out at about 3 o'clock in the morning to start this patrol. The really terrifying thing about it was we didn't have our bomb sniffing dog with us. Him and his handler actually left to go on leave the night before, and that dog could find IEDs just like that. It was amazing. So he was gone, but we also had a full section of engineers with us too, and these guys are very, very highly skilled, highly trained. So I remember my company commander gave everybody the halt, and out of the 200-man patrol, I was the second last in the order of march, And my driver, Mike Flood, was actually standing behind me, but he was quite spaced out. He was probably about 10 meters back from me at that point. So we took the halt, and I think we waited around for about for a good while anyways. When he actually told everybody to stand back up and move, we all stepped over this berm. Everybody went over this berm that was only maybe a foot thick of dirt, and onto this little goat path type road. And the reason that I was actually targeted, because when they hit a patrol, I mean, they're thinking really hard about this too, how to actually properly do it to inflict massive casualties or deaths. So they hit the front, the middle, or the back. And unfortunately for me, I was carrying 3 mortar bombs on my back that day. So from the investigation, from what I understand is, and it makes total sense to me, they wanted to set off my mortar bombs to kill other soldiers around me as well. Thankfully, I wasn't stupid. I kept my mortar bombs actually wrapped, and I didn't keep them primed. So they weren't, even if I dropped one of them, I mean, it wouldn't go off. I kept the safety. I never ever armed them, to say the least. So I had them in my backpack, and luckily they didn't go off. But the first thing I remember hearing was my driver screaming, because the blast had actually picked him up and threw him probably about 50 meters away from me, so quite far. The blast was actually caused by a 120 millimeter mortar bomb and a 105 artillery shell, and they can inflict some very, very traumatic, serious damage. It was probably enough to take out a light armored vehicle if it would have hit one. Ultimately, it was remote detonated, and I think because of the size of the blast, it probably would save my life. I think a lot of guys would actually agree that the size of the blast is what saved me, because the debris field was these big chunks of metal, fist-sized chunks of metal, and when they flew, a lot of them missed me. So the blast actually just picked me up and threw me straight up in the air. You know, a bomb trying to kill me actually somewhat saved me and then killed me too. So, ironically.
And you were saying, sorry, go ahead, PJ.
No, I was just going to get Leah's point of view from all of this, because it's just, I mean, Mike, you told me that you were awake sort of during this, and you hear people talking about somebody's got shrapnel and there's a double amputation, and you at that point, I guess shock obviously overtakes you. You didn't know they were talking about you.
No, I never thought in a million years that I was the one that was actually hurt. I thought maybe I was knocked down.
Yeah.
Because one of my sergeant majors actually, he came in to be my number 3 to help us, because we didn't have enough guys to carry all the equipment. So I volunteered to take the mortar tube that we had and some mortar bombs. I had a sergeant major jump in with us too, and he said, "Mike, whatever you need, just let me know." And I said, "Sir, can you just carry like the base plate, and that would really help us out a lot." And my number 2 was my driver for the mortar if we needed it. So I know that my sergeant major actually got picked up and thrown forward after talking to him even just a couple of years ago, and popped his eardrums. So I know he was laying down and he was getting assessed, but I know he wasn't badly injured. And I thought maybe that might have been the situation. I was blown up off my feet, but I knew something was wrong, because I couldn't physically stand up. I couldn't move. My body was shaking. My nerves were completely shaking. And when I finally actually kind of tilted my head to look at my uniform and had enough strength to lift my arm, I was smoking. My whole body was smoking. So I was actually flash burned head to toe. And then I started realizing the damage. I had enough strength to look at my forearm, and my radials on both my arms were slashed. So blood was spitting all over the place. And at that point, the guys just said, "Don't move, don't move. Mike, we got you. Just stay still." They ran out of tourniquets.
Wow.
They ran out of tourniquets trying to stop the blood flow. And talking to these guys, they're still traumatized by it. And I can understand why. Like, you see your buddy so badly injured, laying on the ground. And these guys were literally holding my arteries closed so I wouldn't bleed to death. And I owe them everything. I owe them my life.
Here's somebody else that you owe. I want to talk about this sweet young thing in about 12 seconds. Leah, you meet this bad boy on your birthday in 2002. What was that first meeting like?
Well, it's not like what everyone would expect, actually. I was literally there for the free drink and I was going home. But a friend at the time, well, she became my friend at the time. This girl kept coming over to the table that I was at with my friend that I was out with. She asked if I was single, and she had all these really kind of odd questions for a stranger to ask. And she mentioned that I had caught Mike's eye and that I should probably pop over there and say hi and introduce myself before I head home for the night. And I kind of blew her off. Yeah, sure, of course. But she came over, I think, twice or three more times, and she was pretty insistent. So at the end of the night, I'm like, you know what? I'm back in the area. I could use some friends. So I went over to the table and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself.
To this nice, fine young man.
That's right. Asked for my phone number, and I told him no. I told him that I would take his and that I would call him.
Maybe.
It turned out I actually ended up losing his phone number. So for a couple of weeks passed, and I went down. We have a little container by the laundry, so pocket stuff goes into it, and sure enough, his number was sitting in it. So I thought, a couple weeks have passed. I'll give him a call, and here we are, 18 years later. So.
Well, and you know what's remarkable about the 18 years is 11 of them have been spent in hospitals and rehab. So with the telephone playing such a prominent role in your love story, which truly is a love story for the ages, I talk about you guys all the time. I want you to tell me a little bit about the phone call that took place when you found out he was injured. What happened from your side of the story?
Well, everything happened actually very quickly. I got the phone call at 3:43 in the morning, December 5th. It was a Friday. And I had this feeling of uneasiness. And I know people, talk about this feeling, but I just had this feeling that something had happened, something I just had no idea. And I was awake, and the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before I picked it up. And it was the Padre. She asked me to identify myself. I did. She also asked me that I get up because they were on their way to my home. I'm certain that they called me from my driveway because the second I turned on my living room light, there was a knock at the door. They came in. Actually, I didn't even invite them in. I kind of wanted to know immediately what was going on. So I eventually invited them in, and they kind of filled me in on what they knew at the time because things were changing pretty steadily. Mike had clinically died twice. So, and at the time, I wasn't told about his left arm or hand, the damage sustained there. I did know at the time that he had lost both of his legs. I knew that he was stable-ish. He was responding. Yeah. And then from there, I went to the embassy literally like 3 hours later, got my passport, and I was on a flight to Germany. So it was very quickly. They handled everything incredibly well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And Mike, I wonder if you could describe what was the first thing when you could actually speak about what happened. What was the first thing that you said to Leah when you saw her in the hospital, and how did you feel about the impact all this was going to have on you guys as a couple?
The first thing I said to her was, I love you, but I also said, I'm sorry. And the reason I said that, because in my own mind, I had actually changed everything in our lives. We had just had like this, we just got a house, and, we had all these things going on in our lives, like a young couple should, that we were looking forward to. And this one IED changed everything in our lives. And I at first I thought it was going to be negative. It was all going to be for the worst. I knew we would have to move. I knew that we would have to get new vehicles, and it was going to cost a lot of money. I felt like I let Leah down, and I felt like I let my family down. But, you know, over the years, I've discovered, I mean, there's no way around these circumstances. They happen to soldiers every day that they're serving overseas for their countries. And it's out of your hands. It really is. And the best thing that you could do is try to find a new normal, is what we call it. And that just entails living with your disability and trying to move forward and instead of staying in the past. Don't let your disability drag you down, essentially.
And Leah, from your point of view, when you hear Mike basically say he's sorry to you and feeling guilty about what he had done to you, what are you thinking?
That's for me, like, I didn't expect that. Well, I did expect that, and I didn't expect that from Mike, because that's just Mike. He's always thinking about everybody else, even in a time like that. But yeah, we just kind of like, next, where do we go from here?
I want to ask you about that, because you had, as PJ was mentioning, you had something like 14 months in rehab in an Ottawa hospital.
Yeah.
You're learning how to do everything again. Mike, you know, PJ was telling me you had a lot of difficulties to deal with, including dealing with some mental health and depression issues that started to set in after one of your surgeries. Then you get invited to the launch event for what PJ was describing at the beginning, for the Toronto 2017 Invictus Games. And there you have a chance meeting with the founder and patron of those games, Prince Harry. How much was that another aha moment for you and for your life?
It was amazing, because it set me on the path that I'm on now. You know, I originally thought it was going to be difficult to talk to Prince Harry, but it really wasn't, because, I mean, he served as a soldier for his country. So speaking to him was like talking to another soldier. It was actually quite easy. So I definitely didn't feel intimidated or starstruck. I just felt like I was talking to another guy who served, that understood where I was coming from. And when he offered me the chance to compete at the Invictus Games for my country, you know, all I really wanted to do was to wear the uniform again. But after retirement, I had to take it off, and I lost the maple leaf with that. But joining Team Canada gave that back to me, the chance to represent my country. So it was amazing. There's really no words I can actually tell you to describe it. But it really set me on the right path, for sure.
You know, Leah, I think back to Toronto Invictus Games 2017 and what a special moment that was. And I wonder for you, what was the impact emotionally? I mean, Mike went on to win 2 gold medals, right? In rowing?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I got it wrong there for a second. So emotionally, how did this sort of change the direction of your lives? What was it like for you to see him on top of the podium?
Incredible. Because originally, like, when we started the Invictus Games journey, his first goal wasn't to win the medals, right? It was really just to participate and have that experience. And at the time, it couldn't have come at a better time, because, like Mike had mentioned, he was retiring. He kind of lost his purpose. He felt like he lost his purpose. The Invictus Games gave him the camaraderie, gave him the support that he was missing. And the medals were just a bonus. Like, the medals were just a bonus on top of it all. And it has led him to where he is now.
Totally transformative, I would say.
100%. Yeah.
And Mike, you talk about not being able to have that maple leaf on, you know, as you're retiring as a soldier, but suddenly you get the maple leaf back on representing Canada at the Invictus Games. And then a year after that, if I have my dates correct, you're at a Paralympian search event in Toronto, where they're looking for athletes who can perhaps participate for Canada in the Paralympics. And you're spotted, and they start looking at you for para-canoeing. What can you tell us about that and some of the trials and tribulations of that journey, as you now start to look ahead to Tokyo 2020 and perhaps representing Canada once again on the Paralympic team?
Well, it actually happened. So after the Invictus Games, I was told how well I had done, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. It was actually only 2 months later. So I went to Toronto for the Paralympic trials in 2017. I think it was in November. And when I went in there, I thought maybe I was going to continue with rowing or hand cycling or something, but I didn't. There was representatives from CKO Canoe Kayak Ontario and CKC Canoe Kayak Canada, who's actually my para-national coach now. And they looked at me and they said, you know, we watched you on TV rowing. And I said, they said, you're the guy that we watched. You're Megatron. You're the Megatron guy, right? And I said, yeah. And they said, have you ever thought about, instead of rowing, maybe paddling? And I said, well, what's the difference between paddling and rowing? Which a lot of Canadians constantly mess up. They don't really understand the difference. And they said, well, paddling, we go forward, rowing, we go backwards. We get to see where we're going. That's perfect. I love being able to see where I'm going, because rowing in a boat was always a little difficult for me. I mean, you always have to look for the buoys on the left and the right. And as you're rowing backwards, you always have to line yourself up by where the buoys are after you've passed them, which is kind of scary. So with paddling, I actually get to see where I'm going, which I love. But, you know, I went through a lot of different trials, and I went through a lot of different training. I thought maybe I was going to be able to jump into a kayak or a canoe and transfer my skills and be just as good at kayaking or canoeing as I was rowing. But that just wasn't the case. It was a completely different sport. So my first year, I remember for the Ontario trials, I got a gold medal. And I thought, hey, this is going perfect. I'm doing really, really good. But when I went to nationals, I got a silver medal. And it's because I went up against a couple other athletes that were much more experienced. But, you know, I think I needed that. I really needed to see where I can improve upon. I think if any athlete gets into a sport and all they get is gold, 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 I mean, what's really the point? You're not really learning anything. You're just kind of rolling through, right? So this gave me the opportunity by getting silver medals to see where I can improve upon in the sport, and I really did. It was really, really eye-opening. So I started training full time at my club, and which is in Ottawa as well. So I automatically went from training, you know, 3 times a week to twice a day, plus in the gym as well. So I was doing 3 training sessions a day, 6 days a week, and taking Sundays off. And even now, I mean, here out in lovely BC, you know, we're up at 7, and we usually don't get off the water back into for supper till 5:30. So it's a full work day, but you really need that. If you look at your sport like it's a full-time job, a full-time commitment, you're going to go so much further than coming into a sport thinking, oh, I could just put in part-time and do it, which is, you talk to any athlete, that's just not realistic. You have to dedicate your life to your sport, much like I did with the military. Like I was fully committed in the military, and now I transferred that skill, and now I'm completely committed to my sport.
Do you look at, you know, Canadians probably know a few of the people that have come before you in canoe kayak, people like Adam Van Couverden, who of course had a lot of success at the Olympic level. Do you look at somebody like him and his technique? Does that help you in any way, shape, or form?
No.
No.
He's a kayaker. I'm a canoeer. But I mean, absolutely, it'd be great to talk to him. The guy was definitely a fantastic athlete. But my discipline is Baja, which is very, very specialized, even in para. This is going to be the first time it's going to be, you know, it's the first time this sport is going to be at the Paralympics. So canoeing for Olympians is different than it is for Paralympians. Paralympians, like you see in the picture of my boat there, it's very, very different from what the C1 paddler does.
In what way?
So they don't have the outrigger on the side. They're on one knee. Their boats are usually quite a bit smaller, and their paddles are completely different.
Okay.
So we do paddle together. I paddle all the time with the canoers here, and I've learned so much from everybody. But even though the technique and the instruction is still given the same, there's still there's still quite a bit of a division between to being good at C1 and being good at Vaha. There's the way we control our boats is still different, and the amount of time that you have to spend into your boat to be good at it is still different. C1 is incredibly difficult just to get your balance. Whereas Vaha, it's very difficult just to be able to learn how to control the boat. The slightest little gust of wind will throw you all over the lake,
Leah, everybody in Canada and around the world, for that matter, has had their lives turned upside down in the last 7 months, 9 months by COVID-19. I'm curious if you could tell us about the two of you. And when Mike talks about the Paralympic Games in Tokyo, of course, they were canceled this summer. So I'm curious what impact COVID-19 has had on you guys as a couple and your hopes and dreams.
Well, our hopes and dreams are the exact same. We haven't let COVID decide that for us. Even though Tokyo was canceled last year or postponed, we're still training just as hard for Tokyo 2021. And after that, Paris. We don't plan on giving that up at all. For COVID, for training for Mike, I was basically his coach while he was home. We would set him up downstairs. We have all the equipment down there. Dry training, it's a little not as, not the same as being on the water, but it was maintenance. It kept him going and motivated. And we did a lot of live training sessions too with actually the IG-18 team, or sorry, not IG-18, the Hague 2021. So we kind of did like Zoom training sessions. Mike is motivating them and we're just kind of motivating each other, just keeping it going. We haven't let it affect us or decide for us.
Were there things, because of the story and because of what you've gone through, that perhaps you could use in terms of trying to deal with, the things that life is now throwing all of us, like the uncertainty, the lack of vaccine, economic issues, health issues. Everybody's dealing with it in their own way. But I'm curious if, because of some of the things you guys have been through in your lives, how that might have assisted you trying to deal with what you were dealing with over the last few months.
I believe it had almost everything to do with it. It literally took one step that day to change our entire future, all of our plans, everything. So, we've had to adapt and overcome for years since. Like you had mentioned earlier, we spent 14 months in the hospital. When we got out of the hospital, we had to build a barrier-free home, which took us almost 2.5 years. Then we had to learn, our old eating places, we can't get in there with a wheelchair, so you would have to be walking that day. We still to this day plan everything, everywhere we go when we travel. I have a little black book in my car, little towns that we stop in and we stop and eat. I'll make a little note. Yes, this place worked perfectly for us, or no, it didn't. Or you know what, the restaurant itself worked really great, but the bathroom didn't. So we just know that when we're passing through, it's a place that we can stop in, and enjoy a meal like everyone else. But we're always, every day, we have to still think about those things.
Are there things that we as a society need to really be thinking about a lot more, that you guys have had to learn over the last few years that you could share with people, like things that we really need to be thinking and do a lot better with?
I think, I know Ontario's put out this program. I think that, it's kind of mandatory that places now have to be modified or renovated to accommodate. And so far, I think everybody's doing what they can. And you have to consider the money too. It's frustrating, but we're very understanding as well. But yeah, things like handrails and little tiny things that you wouldn't think of. Instead of a turn doorknob, maybe one that latches down, because Mike's hands don't work. Things like that, But I don't expect everybody to run out there and do that. That's just one of our things. But I think for the most part, everyone's trying to do what they can. And I mean, we've had people bend over backwards for us. Mike not being able to get into a restaurant, literally the waiting staff picked him up in his chair and brought him in. So, I mean, people are always willing and able to accommodate. You just really have to know that you can ask for help. That's one of the other things too. If just ask for help, they're not going to say no.
Mike, when you think about resiliency, I'm curious what that word means to you after what you've been through. And because this is a show about resiliency, I'm wondering if there's advice that you could offer to people, or you have offered to people, about getting through the tough times.
Oh, wow. Well, coming from the military, and especially with 3rd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment, they kind of beat it into you almost, to a sense that, it's part of your life. As a soldier, you're not allowed to just give up. You can't just lay down and die. You have to constantly find a way to accomplish your goals, no matter what that is. Or in the military, we say accomplish your mission. You're not allowed to fail. If you fail, your team fails. And if your team fails, you fail the country. So I think it was already ingrained and instilled. So when we were down in Florida training, just before everybody was getting ready to go compete at the last Worlds that were supposed to happen in canoe kayak, we got a couple of warnings that COVID was spreading, and any day now we could be pulled out of Florida, and we might even miss our chance to go to Worlds. So everybody was really on edge about that and nervous, because we trained so hard at that point. And then the day finally came that our staff and the people that were in charge told us, okay, everybody has to pack up. We have to go. We have to get out of here. And we don't mean by the end of the week. We have to go now. When you get home, we'll be in touch. Mm-hmm. So me and my teammate, we jumped in my truck, loaded up everything, and away we went. We had to leave that very morning. So when I got back in particular, I kept thinking in my head, how am I going to continue training? I'm stuck in my house. It's cold back home. I came back when there was still snow on the ground. So all the lakes and rivers and stuff are frozen. And every single athlete had that same problem. So you had to become very, very resilient. You had to find ways to grow and to adapt. There was athletes that their parents had pools. So they were taking the top layer of ice off the pool and putting a board across, just so they can get on top of the pool with their paddle and still train like that. For myself, I had an erg. I have a hand cycle that I use as well, and I have a big weight gym down in my basement as well. So I was quite fortunate. I was able to come up with some pretty interesting ways to train and stay tip-top shape. And I think a lot of the athletes did many, many things very similar, because we already had that goal in mind. Everybody who's here in BC with me, they want to go to the Olympics. They want to go to the Paralympics. And how do you get there? It's up to you to do the training. You have to be resilient. You have to find ways to adapt and overcome. There's no excuse to come to a training camp like this and say, oh, I'm not ready. When you're an athlete, you have to be ready. Much like I was in the military, at a moment's notice, I could have been packed up and ready to go to the field or on a mission for a week or a month at a time. And there was times I couldn't even tell Leah where I was going, because I didn't even know where I was going until I got to work and they told me where I was going. So, resiliency is definitely something I think every Canadian should have in their back pocket. They should always be planned. They should always have targets and goals, and always adapt and overcome. There's no excuse for anybody to tell me that they can't do something when I know that you can do something. I myself was told I would probably have extreme difficulties walking again, and some doctors even told me I would never walk again at all. And I did all those things. I walked, and then I ran. I did the Army 5K walk more than twice. I've raced my hand cycle. I've traveled around the world, and I've raced, and there's still more to come. I'm never just going to give up. I'm going to keep going.
And Leah, I want to ask you that question as well. Is there one piece of advice that you've learned from your experience that you can share with people about getting through the tough times and being more resilient?
Yeah. Well, to touch on what Mike was saying, like, you know, before his injury, he was very active anyway. Like he would bike to work, do the 10K every day and all of those things. And he actually missed it. And him coming home from Florida, you know, we had to put a plan together, a training plan together. You can still do, like Mike, we've just learned that, you know, he can still do everything he used to do. We just do it a little differently. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but the end result's the same. Set little goals for yourself. And when you accomplish them, set a bigger goal. And when you accomplish that, set another goal. Yeah, don't let this COVID thing beat you. Like, don't let it decide for you what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. I mean, obviously, I want everyone to stay safe and healthy and practice, you know, the social distancing stuff, but don't let that decide for you.
I have another question for you. So Leah, in case you thought you were getting away with not too many questions, I'm here. Yeah, exactly. So Mike had it beaten into him by the military. Failure is no option.
Yeah.
I want to know who beat that into you because you're not military. So where did you get that sort of drive to just not accept failure as an option?
I would actually give that credit to my father. My father is a pretty strong man. He's pretty determined. Yeah, I would say my dad for sure. And Mike, being with him 18 years, I'm an infantry wife. So he's sort of instilled that in me too. So I have two really strong men in my life right now.
And they have a very strong woman in theirs. They're very lucky.
Thank you.
Mike, you were talking as we hooked up with you today about celebrating Remembrance Day this week with some of the team and sharing some of your stories. I wonder if you could talk about that and what it was like to share those stories with some of your teammates out there in BC.
Well, I'm going to tell everybody who's listening in today the same thing that I told my team. For soldiers, Remembrance Days every day. Even though November 11th is still the hardest day of the year for me, I mean, I can't escape what happened. Every single morning I get up out of my bed, I still have to look at the fact that I'm missing my legs, my arms and hands are injured, I'm in a wheelchair, and I have prosthetics. I have to adapt and overcome every single day. I have to be resilient every single day, no matter what I do. So I can never forget. Now, one of the things that I like to do is share the stories of those that actually aren't here with us anymore. So I did that. I picked a couple of soldiers that I knew that I served with. And even though they're gone, I still like to share what kind of soldier that they were, what kind of father that they were, what kind of friend they were to me and to everybody else. I think emotionally, it really touches every Canadian. Just to know that soldiers love and respect their nation so much and that they're willing to sacrifice so much. But, you know, I told a lot of heartwarming stories as well as some very dark and difficult things that I've actually seen and gone through. But Canadians deserve to hear those stories. And the worst thing that we can do as a nation is try to hide those stories and try to put them aside. I mean, the only way as a nation that we can ever move forward and learn is by sharing what people have seen. And I think, you know, every soldier who is able to talk about their experience, you know, I highly recommend that they do. I originally suffered as well from some PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and some mental health issues as well, because I was in such a dark place for a long time by all these things that had happened. And the more that I talked about them and shared my stories with other Canadians, all of a sudden it just became less of an issue. It's like that weight came off my shoulders, and suddenly talking about it is still hard, but now I can talk about it. It's not pent up inside me, eating away at me. So, and I think everybody on my team definitely really, really respects that. I'll share something with everybody. So my team, at the end of the day, they came over and they handmade this beautiful card for me.
Oh, wow.
And
That
then
is beautiful with the poppies.
yeah, and then everybody they signed it as well. So
Very nice.
really, really, really lovely. So it's nice to get the respect from everybody on the team. And if some of them go on to become public service or soldiers or police officers too, of course I'd be proud of everything that they do. But it takes a lot of commitment to be a soldier. It takes a lot of determination and drive, and to carry this weight with you, especially on Remembrance Day when people, I guess they almost expect you to share what you've gone through, as hard as it is. I think I have an obligation as well to tell people what happened and share the stories of those who are no longer here anymore, because if they can't speak for themselves anymore, then I'm going to speak for them.
You were saying as we joined you today that it almost felt a bit surreal for you to talk about the experience that you had. I wonder if you could explain why it felt so surreal for you.
Because it sounds like a movie.
Yeah, it sure does.
It sounds like a movie, and even to me, I talk to myself and I think about what I'm saying, and it doesn't sound real. Yes. It really doesn't sound real. But everything happened, and it's crazy the amount of things that have happened over the past couple of years, just for me and Leah, and the things that we've gone through. Sometimes there's so much information I got to get out and relate to the public that I have to like compartmentalize my mind, because I'm just a scatterbrain as I'm trying to relay these stories and the messages. I've been asked before to write a book, but I don't think I could fit it all into a book. I'd have to write like a series or something, like a Harry Potter novel series or something. I'm not too sure.
But you're a very good storyteller, though.
Oh,
yes.
So I think that's why people are telling you got to write your life story, because there's so much there and you tell it so well.
Well, it's an unfinished work right now because I'm still going. And I could do a story on the war in Afghanistan after I get share the stories with the guys that I served with. I'd like to include their perspective as well. It's not just about me. It's about everybody who served. So I'd like to gather up as much stories and information as I can to share that to the Canadian public. But I don't know, maybe a two-parter. The second part could be about where I'm at now and how I was resilient and how I got to the Paralympics or something.
I'd like to have a final question, unless PJ has more, to both of you, talking about how you at one point, Leah, I think was saying that Mike started questioning his life's purpose after the injuries that he suffered in Afghanistan. I wonder, now you represent Canada in the Maple Leaf. You've done it both as a soldier and now as an athlete. I'm wondering how much you see that as your life's purpose, that this is why you were here all along, to represent Canada in these different ways. Start with you, Mike.
Okay. I don't know. I didn't actually think that this is going to be my purpose. Like we discussed before, I was in a very, very dark place. I really didn't feel like I had purpose anymore. I thought everything was done, game over. Not that I was so dark that I was having suicidal tendencies or anything like that, but I really thought that I was going to be that guy who was going to be stuck in my house, have a serious drinking problem, have to attend, sessions with psychologists, psychiatrists, just to keep me stable. But I took control of my life. I really didn't want that to happen. I really wanted to keep moving forward. And, the drive probably stemmed from the military. I did not want to give up. I did not want to let down Leah. I didn't want to let down my country, especially after the Invictus Games. People just started knowing who I was and what I was all about, what I do. So I think the burning flame inside me was I want to make everybody proud. And I'm proud to wear the Canadian Maple Leaf. I'm proud to represent Canada. And I love running into people and kids running up to me and asking me questions about my prosthetics and being a soldier and now being an athlete. Right now we're staying at one of the schools down here at one of the dorms, and every single day the kids come up and ask questions and smile and wave. So, that really motivates me, keeping me going forward as well too, just to see that so many people are so proud and so happy to be a part of my story and hear everything that I have to say to them.
And Leah, Mike talks about wanting to make people proud. How proud are you?
Endless. When everything first happened for us in 2008 after the incident and stuff, we never had the conversation about why us. We never did the why us. We just kind of picked the ball up from there, kind of, like Mike said, started living our new normal. Mike joined the military when he was 19, so after
18. He corrected me the other night via email. 18. Just to make sure I got it out there.
Because I was actually drinking age when I came to Quebec, Saint Jean, Quebec.
Okay.
That's how we know. It's always about the beer. Now we all know.
That's the first thing that came to mind.
But yeah, the Invictus Games again couldn't have come at a perfect time. His retirement was literally the same month. So one uniform was coming off, one was coming back on. When it came to the Paralympic search, Mike actually debated even going because there was an age limit in the email, and Mike was over that. And he's like, well, I'm like, let's just go. And best case scenario, they'll hook you up with a local club. They'll introduce you with, whatever adaptive sports programs that they have. And we went, and boom, here we are. Now he's wearing the leaf again. So yeah, proud doesn't even begin to describe it.
And what do you see as your life's purpose?
Geez, that's a good one. I'm just here. I'm supporting Mike. I'm here for him. I put a little bit on hold for me when Mike had his surgery 5 years ago. That was a very extensive surgery. He had quite a few complications. Invictus happened, and then now with the national team, and I think I said it at a symposium with Prince Harry. I said, it's Mike's turn right now, and it's Mike's turn. So here, I'll every step of the way.
You know what? PJ was so right.
I knew it.
This was an unbelievably outstanding discussion with you guys. When you talk about resiliency, PJ was sort of saying off the bat that your name, both your guys' names, is probably beside the definition somewhere in some dictionary about resilience, and you have so much to share with people, so many stories. I hope you get to that book one day, Mike. And if you need any help, PJ and I are here. We can maybe help you with it down the road.
Yeah, for sure.
And Leah, you are unbelievable in terms of the role that you played in that story, and will continue to play. So pleasure meeting with you. Pleasure meeting you here. Pleasure having you join us as well, Mike. And we can't thank you enough for taking the time today to share your story.
I'd actually like to add something on behalf of Leah. So a couple of years ago, and you got to understand too, Leah had actually never done much media at this point.
Never.
It's hard to tell the story, and of course she's camera shy. But she was asked to go to a gala one year, which is the Reynolds for Heroes Gala, which is held annually for soldiers. And they asked her to speak. Now, from my perspective as well, I'd never actually heard Leah get up there and tell a version of her story. Like I'd actually told everybody my version of the story so many times. I'd never actually heard Leah talk about her version of the story. Now she got up there and, even me, I know it happened to me, but the story itself happened to us. And to hear it from somebody else that I love, sharing it brought me to tears because it felt like it was a third party experience. At that point, I felt like somebody that was standing in the crowd listening to this horrific story that had happened to this lovely couple. And And I remember telling Leah, I said, don't look at anybody in the crowd, in the front row, because they're all going to be crying. And sure enough, they were bawling their face off. But she did so well, and I'm so proud of her. But you know, it's not just the military members that suffer when something like this happens. It's the family, it's the spouse, and we've seen it too with the children. That the children lose their parents, either they lose their lives or they suffer from mental or physical traumas, and they go through so much as a team. You know, it's not just the military member that has to heal; it's the whole family. But Leah knows what it's like to get that knock on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and to hear it was bone chilling, to say the least. And I really wish that you know, military spouses like Leah would share the stories a little bit more. We do hear from the soldiers from time to time what actually happened, but to see what the families have to also endure, I think is very important, especially when it comes to resiliency. I think every Canadian deserves to know the truth.
It's funny that you say that, and I just want to interject before you wrap things up, Teddy. But when I first met Mike and Leah, it was at Invictus Games, as I said, and I asked if they would come on my podcast, which I produced for Invictus Games, called Invictus Games Radio. And Leah was very sort of hesitant at first. I said, we're just going to have a chat. And honestly, there is nobody more natural. And anytime that I get the chance to say, I told you so, Teddy, is a good day for me. So you guys have confirmed that. Thank you very much.
PJ did tell me so. Thanks again, Mike, and thanks to you, Leah, for joining us today. And I hope to see you again. I hope we can run into each other in Tokyo next summer, if all goes well.
That sounds
Thanks
good.
again. Leah Cuffe and Mike Trauner joined us. Mike, of course, is trying to compete for Canada in para-canoeing. We spoke to him today from his training location in BC, while his wife, Leah Cuffe, joined us from their home in Pembroke. Thanks to you for joining us. Please share the video with your friends, like our Think Redefined Facebook page, my Teddy Katz YouTube channel, and help us spread the word about the Resiliency Project. Please join us again in a couple of weeks for another great story of resilience and reinvention. Thanks to my partner, PJ Kwong. Bye for now.